what upset me the most, and it's always on my mind all the time, was seeing all those poor people, all those chaps, both British and German, lying in the gutter, you know, all just lying in the gutter. That was terrible. Yeah, all dead bodies, yeah. And a lot of the poor parachutists that came down on the first day, they were still lying out in the sun for a week, you know. It was, yeah, not very nice. Not very nice. The very first thing that happened was the first aircraft came over and through an anti-personnel audio thing, a terrible sound. That's the first thing that happened before they started dropping bombs. There's a terrible piercing noise.
Hey everyone, this is Rishi Sharma with Remember WWII. I have the extreme honor of sharing the incredible testimony of a World War II veteran named Ronald Collins. He fought in the Battle of Leros and was taken prisoner. It's a battle that does not often get talked about, but the men who fought and the men who died there deserve to be remembered forever. You will be amazed by this man's recall. He's 102 years old, but would put any 20-year-old to shame. I hope you enjoy listening to his interview as much as I enjoyed meeting and documenting his story. I would like to also thank the Salisbury chapter of the Veterans and Armed Forces Breakfast Club. The Armed Forces and Veterans Breakfast Club is an incredible charity organization. They basically have regular meetings in a local area where veterans and current serving members of the military can get together to talk and to support one another. It is because of this club I was able to meet and interview Mr. Collins. I've included information about them in the description of this video. I would highly encourage anyone living in the Salisbury region to check them out, consider joining, and to definitely look at their online presence. It's a great group of people. I would also like to give a special thank you to Mr. Bob Barrick, who helped facilitate this incredible interview. If you guys would like to support my mission to interview more World War II veterans, please consider going to rememberwwi2.org and donating. All money goes directly to getting these heroes on camera.
I'm Ronald Collins, I'm 102, and I'm going to tell you about my experiences at the Battle of Leros and also my time in Stalag Luft 1. However, you may be interested to know how all this came about. It's back in 1938, and I'm fascinated by everything electrical and electronic, and I started to make crystal sets and eventually made my own radio, and along came the war, and I thought to myself, I don't want to be running around with a rifle. I want to be in a nice, dry, warm hangar, repairing and maintaining radio sets for Spitfires. So I thought, well, the only way I can do that is to volunteer, because I was due to be called up and be conscripted. So I went across to the RAF agency, and they said, oh yes, you seem to know something about radio. Yes, we'll take you in as a wireless mechanic. So off I go and do a long course learning about RAF radios. At the end of the course, I do an examination, and they say, oh, your results are so good, you're not going to be a wireless mechanic. Oh dear, I thought, this isn't terrible. You're going to be a radio location engineer. And I thought, what the hell is that? Doesn't sound very good. Anyway, I followed another course, only to find out it was a cover for what we now know is radar. And they called it radio location, radio direction and ranging radar. So there we are. I get the course. I go off to just one unit in the UK at Ventnor in the Isle of Wight, just to get some idea of actual radar. I rushed out to Egypt, and I just saw the tail end of the North African campaign, and I saw the end of the fighting, and driving the Germans out of North Africa. As you may or may not know, the Italians decided that they weren't on the right side now, and decided to pack in and come in with the Allies. The result of that was both the Allies and the Axis group go tearing off around the Mediterranean, taking over the property that the Italians had taken from the Greeks. Unfortunately, we didn't come out all that well, because the Germans managed to get Rhodes, which was the key island in the Mediterranean at that time, and we just got the few islands in the Dodecanese. Unfortunately, the only air cover we had was on the adjoining island, the island of Kos Island. And unfortunately, on one Sunday afternoon, the Germans came, bombed, and destroyed every one of those aircraft. So we had absolutely no cover. So we realised we weren't in a very good position. But anyway, things went on quite well. We were just set the equipment up, and just reporting occasional aircraft coming over, just on reconnaissance, and we managed to even get a few swims in the sea, so everything was all okay. But then, after a few weeks, we noticed that there was a big fleet of German ships offshore in the distance. We thought, this is a bit ominous. I wonder what all this is going to be. Like a few days later, on 2 o'clock in the afternoon, we see a black cloud in the distance, and it was a whole fleet of Junker 53s, I think they call them, the ones with the 3 engines and the ribbed sides, and they came in and dropped a tremendous amount of parachutists. Fortunately for us, most of those parachutes were mopped up, and we thought, this is it, they're not going to try this again. Unfortunately, they did. Very next day, in the morning, another big load of aircraft came in and dropped a lot of parachutes, and this time they managed to take hold of the situation. Then the bombing started, and one of the major points on Leros is a mountain with a monastery on the top, and by the monastery were loads of Italian guns, and that became the centre of all the action. Days went by, terrific noise and whatever going on, and we decided that we couldn't use the radars, and not much point in using the radar equipment there, because we know they're already arrived. So we decided the only answer now is we'll burn it all. And so we set light to the tent and all the equipment, and made it for the hills. We're roaming around at Los, myself and a radio. By the way, it was a 12-man radar unit that I was on when we went to Leros, and one of the operators, John Berry, I got quite friendly with him. We both decided we'd just clear off. We're wandering around, and we came across an army unit, and this captain saw us coming and said, "Here, what are you two guys doing?" And we said, "Oh well, we were on a radar unit, but we've had to pack it in." He said, "Right, get into that trench." and I say trench, but it was in actual fact was a stone wall, because there's virtually no soil there on Leros, and all we could do was to get behind this stone wall. And so he said, "Here we are," and he handed us each a rifle and a pile of hand grenades, and said, "There, I know you're with us now." So anyway, the fighting is going on. You could hear the terrific noise, aircraft coming in all the time, dropping more and more parachutists. And at night, this particular unit we were attached to went out, and on one particular night, after several days, they came back absolutely distraught. They'd lost several of their members, and one poor chap, they were dragging this poor bloke along, and they were absolutely exhausted. And the captain said to us, "Will you go out and drag that poor bloke in?" So we had to go out into no man's land and get this poor bloke, and he was bleeding badly from his chest, and we got him back in there, and unfortunately the poor bloke died. And this captain, who said, "Sorry about that," and he gave us a tin of apricots. And we just didn't have the heart to open that tin of apricots. We were thinking about that poor bloke. Anyway, we were being fed by air, dropping cylinders. The Brits came in from Egypt and dropped off these cylinders with the food and ammunition and one thing or another. And so there we are. The war's going on, and fortunately I didn't get as far as us. And then all of a sudden, overnight, it all went quiet, absolutely dead quiet. And troops are running by saying, "It's all over, it's all over, it's all over." So we just upped and away. We made it for the hills. We were wandering around for days. We were drinking out of pools of water, and we were starving. And the Greeks, who were very, 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 very good to us, were helping us by telling us where the Germans were, and we did our best to avoid them. Whilst we're wandering about, I left John, and because I could see in the distance some fruit trees, and I thought, "Oh, there's going to be some fruit there. I'll make for that." So I'm wandering across towards this orchard, and I stepped out onto a track, and that very moment, around the bend in this track, came a motorcycle and sidecar, with a German sitting there with a machine gun in the sidecar. And he came round the corner and he shouted out, "Headlock!" And that split second I thought, do I make a dive for the bushes or just give in? And I thought, no, one, the gun, and I've had it. So I put my hands up. And I get out of the motorcycle sidecar, and they go rifle through my backpack and help themselves to a lovely pair of woolen socks which I had there, and then marched me into town. Where we marched me into Lackey, which was the central town, and then onto the seaplane base, because unfortunately on Leros there was no landing field at all. There was just mountainous hills, and they relied on seaplanes and submarines. And they had two extremely good ports, very deep sea ports, so submarines were just right. We're there in this seaplane base, just lying around, and unfortunately, most of those there with me were Italians, and were there for a day or so, no food, nothing, and we find out that they'd have just shot 20 or 30 Italian officers on the orders of Hitler, who said that they were traitors and they're going to be shot. They'd already shot what I suppose he was an admiral. He was the chief of the navy there. He was shot straight away, and they were then collected together and put onto several ships. We were pushed down into the hold of the ship, threw down tins of dried biscuits and cans of water, and shut us in the hold, a pitch black hold, and off we went. Well, little did we realise that there was 2 or 3 also ships as well, the same, with thousands of Italian prisoners, and they were sunk. And it was what is now called friendly fire. It was unfortunately we sunk those ships, and I was fortunate. I was just on the one ship that made it across. We then arrived at Athens, and we're on the dockside there of Piraeus, and we just wonder what's going to happen to us now. We're then collected together and paraded down the main streets of Athens, and large silent crowds of Greeks each side as we went by, and each side of us ambling along were these lovely bright soldiers with lovely uniforms on, all looking very smart. I was on the outside of all this rabble going down, and all of a sudden a lady pops out from the side of the crowd and hands me a little note, and I shove the note in my pocket and march on. And as we were marching along, I looked up and I could see the Acropolis there in the late afternoon sun, and we made it to a Mercedes-Benz factory, which had been completely stripped, and everything had been carted back to Germany, so we understood. And there we were lying on this concrete floor inside this great big factory. And I remember there all day long, all I could see was a big notice on the wall which said, "Vos ist nicht unterzuwenden, Blastenhofen," which was, watch out for the crane above you. And we then were taken and loaded onto cattle trucks, quite a load of us, about 30 to a truck. And inside this truck was barbed wire down each side, and a narrow bit at the back, so it was sort of a U-shaped corrugated arrangement. And there was just straw lying around there. And the German guards stood in the doorway, so we could look out all the time on one side only. And off we went. We went up through Salonika, and the only toilet and washing facilities was by stopping at different stations and using their facilities. And we pulled in at one particular station in Salonika, and I was standing there, and I noticed that several Greek chaps had trays in front of them, strapped round, and one chap had some newspaper containing what was supposed to be some form of simulated tobacco, and another chap had loads of fruit on it. And I got together, and the chap with the tobacco exchanged his tobacco with fruit, and he came over and gave it to me. And I thought, how nice. We were treated very well by the Greeks all the time. We made it all up through the Balkans, through Sofia, There was poor people with sacking round their feet, all looking very depressed and terrible. Anyway, we got on quite well with these German guards, but what worried me a bit was that I put a round stove in the doorway because it was winter time and it was pretty cold, and I thought to myself, with all that straw there, they were not going to do very well. But anyway, they were very good, and they even played cards under the barbed wire, which is rather nice. So the fighting Germans were quite good. We then made it up as far as all the way up through Yugoslavia. That we could see trains laying on their side, where Tito, General Tito, who was the head of the Yugoslavia at that time. They obviously did a lot of good work in destroying all these trains. We make it up to Vienna, and I'm taken off the train with two other chaps, and told to carry. There were some blankets in the truck. We had to carry these blankets, and we went to a bakery there, and it stripped the bakery of all the contents and made it back to the truck. It had a good old feed, which it hadn't had for a couple of days, and that was that. Right, so off we go again, and we make it up to Ham, Hamm, which is a great big siding, masses and masses of trains there, and goods trains all there, and we parked there for the night. Unfortunately, that very night, the Brits were bombing Ham, and we had to get out of the truck and make it for the railway station. And we went down underneath the railway station, between the tunnel between the two platforms. It was all pitch black, and we stumbled and got down underneath the railway lines there. Eventually, it all died off, and the bombing stopped, and the lights came on. And that moment, there we saw before us masses of German civilians all there with us, and they took one look at us and went for us, and the guards had to hold them off, and we had to make a boat for it to get back to the truck. So off we go, and about a day or so later, we make it to Frankfurt, and at Frankfurt, myself and several people were taken off the truck. We thought, what's all this? We found out that at Frankfurt was a unit called Dulag Luft, and this was a interrogation centre, and we're going to be taken there to be interrogated, and we were immediately put into solitary confinement, and that was pretty awful because the lights were on permanently. It was extremely hot. There was no windows, and there was no handle on the door, and just a wooden platform there for a bed. And of course, after a few days in there, you're running up and down and exercising and all sorts of things that one does, I suppose, in solitary confinement. And of course, if you wanted to go to the toilet, they made you wait for hours before they came. And the food came at all erratic times, so you lost all idea about time. Eventually, I'm taken in and interrogated, and that didn't amount to much because they were telling me more that they knew than I knew about what's going on Leros, and because all I had to do was to say, no comment. That's my number, rank, and name, and that's it. But I did give them my home address and one or two other details, because I thought, nobody knows about me. This might be some assistance. it turns out when I got back home, of course, eventually, that of course my parents had got a telegram to say missing, circumstances unknown, which my mother was completely distraught, and she went off to a sister who also lived not far away, and I understand she was pretty cut up by all this. And my father just said, "You've lost him, he's gone." Awful. So it was pretty awful. Anyway, but the only good thing that came out of being at WWII was the fact that we were now registered. We were now known by the Red Cross. They all knew I existed, and my parents were then told I was now a prisoner. And also, very fortunately, we got a toothbrush and a razor. But while I was there, the commandant of Dulag Luft got us all assembled in a room, and he had a very broad American accent, and he spoke in English, and he said, "If I catch any one of you guys calling my men a son of a bitch, I'll ride you so hard," So that was that. When they landed back onto the trains, and off we go again. And this time we land at Stalingrad 1. And Stalingrad 1, I would mention, is in Pomerania. It's up on the coast, the Baltic coast, and it's not far from Stettin. And also very near it is Peenemünde, the rocket. And right next door to the camp was a flak school. They made a point of putting a flak school next door to us because they knew that we weren't going to be bombed. So there we are. And so there we are. When I arrived there, I'm interrogated by the committee at the camp because they said that they'd had the Germans, actually British, come in who were not prisoners at all, and they had to make sure that I was not one of these characters. Unfortunately, my background, and I was on my own, it was very difficult to persuade them that I was genuine. But anyway, it all went off okay. Now the camp it was on a sandy area with trees around on the outside, and the chances of doing any tunnelling was pretty awful. You couldn't do it because it was all sandy, very very near the coast. Now the barbed wire, as we know, very high barbed wire, but also there was another wire about 2 or 3 meters in, which was an indication that's as far as you could go. If you were playing ball and the ball went into this area, you signalled to the watchtowers, and he would signal okay and allowed you to go in and collect the ball. So you always you couldn't get near the actual barbed wire fence. Now very fortunately I was in one of the original huts. They're all wooden huts, and they it had 2 flush toilets and a cold water shower. Now, as more and more troops came in, they built more compounds, and the idea of the compound was the fact that they could shut each compound off, or open as they liked, so they could restrict the number of people. If there's any rioting or anything like that, they could close it off. And during the day, all the compounds were open, and you could wander around over there. Now, there was 9,000 of us in there eventually, by the time the war came to an end. 9,000, and 7,500 were American air crew, and about 1,500 British troops of different sorts. And those new compounds didn't have the luxury of any fresh water, and they just had 2 rows of seats back to back. So you had 30 toilet seats, and the contents went off to a large pit outside. And every day, a poor old boy with a horse and cart and a big tank used to come in and unload all the contents. And so it was pretty primitive. Now, escaping, that was you couldn't escape as an individual if it was possible. You had to go through an escape committee, and you had to justify the fact that, one, you could speak German and you had something to tell, So you weren't had the chance to escape. Now, I did see 2 chaps escaping, but unfortunately failed. Every day also, a horse and cart used to come in and pick up all the rubbish. And these 2 chaps, these 2 American aircrew, they got into this rubbish, and of course they were wonderful. They just driven out of the camp. Unfortunately, just as they got to the exit, smouldering smoke came out of the rubbish, and these 2 blokes had to jump out because it was all smouldering coals in there. So that was it. That was the end of that. So that's all really happened about the escape side of it. Now the Germans, they were quite happy to provide us with everything under the sun. If we wanted it, they would provide it, because their attitude was, if we were occupied doing something, with something, we're not going to give them any hassle. So we even had a 30-piece orchestra, and they provided all the instruments. There was a big hut, which was like a concert hall. They provided that so they could practice. And amongst these Americans were some fantastic musicians, because you can imagine with 7,500, there were some pretty clever characters there. And it so happened that the conductor of the orchestra was a chap by the name of Hart, and who came from here. He came from Wilton, and so that's where his home was. And this poor chap, he'd been a prisoner right from day one. He was there right from at the beginning of the war. He was a navigator, and they got shot down, and he'd been there for over 4 years. So and he was really clever. He was he wrote shows which were put on there, and after the war he was quite well known in London in the West End. Now, both the American and the British had senior officers. They were in control of everything. The British was a group captain, and he came from Charmouth, which is in Dorset. And the Americans had a Colonel Zemke, Zemke. He was a really, he was a man that he saved us, Colonel Zemke. At the end, he was the man that did it all. And I would recommend to turn up Zemke on the internet and see exactly what that man was like. He spoke both he spoke both German and Russia. He'd been in Moscow before the war in the embassy, and so he was well into all things Russian. And he was able to liaise with the German commandant. He got on very well with him, so he was able to get things, which he wouldn't normally get. Now, a day in the life in a prison was you had a bowl, a brown enamel chipped bowl, and a knife, fork and spoon, and they dished out hot barley stew every day. And of course it wasn't very palatable, and fortunately your main reliant was Red Cross parcels. And these parcels came from America, Britain and Canada. And they all very varied, and they're all good, and we survived because of the Red Cross parcels. Unfortunately, as time went on, the delivery of the parcels got less and less until in the end we were starving, and we sometimes we had to share a parcel and whatever. Now. Rather interesting. Some of the things that were in these parcels were rather interesting, and one particular item was from America, and that was a tin of dried milk. And this tin of dried milk came from the Borden Milk Company in New York, and they called it Klim, milk backwards, and it came in a tin. And the tin was about this round, and when it was stripped out, you got a piece of tin that size, and you could make quite a lot of things out of that. And because you only had stools in the hut, no chairs, stairs, and the top of the stool was 2 planks, and there was a slot down the centre. And with bits of barbed wire, you could make staples. You drove these staples in underneath, and with your table knife, you're able to guillotine this tin. And the Americans turned out some incredible things. One I remember was one chap made a lovely suit case, just a luggage case out of it. And one of the most wonderful things I ever saw there was a forge. And this forge was a bed plank, because your bed was a number of planks. The planks were about this size and about that wide. And on the end of the plank, you had a clay pot, and with a hole in the side. And with the aid of the Klim tin manufacturer, you made a big flywheel with a fan, and it blew into this hole in the clay, and with the aid of a few twigs which you picked out round the site, you could turn out a cup of tea in the morning. And I've only seen one of those since. And that was in a museum down in Durban. I got one of them there, these things. So every morning you see these chaps sitting down by the side of the hut with their winding away, making themselves a hot cup of tea. Now the entertainment there mostly was walking around the site. During the day all the sites was open, and you used to pick up another chap. We walked in pairs, so you could have a little chat, and you could spend several hours walking around the whole of the site. That was the most thing you did. They were a sport, of course. The Americans, they played baseball all the time. That they had all the full kit, and we had what I suppose you call sand quoits, where you have the net and you throw the quoit over, backwards and forwards. But nobody could get hold of a quoit. It wasn't something you wouldn't have in Germany. So the quoits were made out of rope, a circle of rope, and then wrapped around with more rope, which was all right. But unfortunately, if you got hit by this thing, it was really uncomfortable, and the ends of your fingers all got raw and sore handling this quoit. So you had to wait a few days before you go out and play another game. So that was the main thing. There was quite a decent library and lots of American paperbacks came across. Rather interesting, these paperbacks, I've never seen them before or since. And the paperback was horizontal landscape instead of which is portrait normally. And I used to read all these American things. And I remember reading A Tree Grows in Brooklyn, which is a popular title at the time. Now, as airmen came in almost daily to build up to this 9,000, and they used to bring all the information across. And when I arrived, even though I hadn't been in UK for 6 months or more, they wanted to know the lyrics of Chattanooga Choo Choo, which was the tune at the time. So anyway, so life wasn't too bad, and every day you had what they call a POW, which is you had to go out and be counted. And I don't know whether we were in pairs, in twos or fives, but they went along and counted, and it was all brought together, all the numbers, to see if everybody escaped. That's why they had the twice a day, because they wanted as quick as possible to find out, if anybody had escaped, and they would go through all the huts to see if anybody was around. Now, the one thing that was interesting was lots of activity used to go on, illegal activity used to go on in the huts, and the Germans were walking around with dogs all day long, and they were seeing and going into huts to see what was going on. So to warn the people who were carrying out these activities, we had every hut had somebody out the door checking to watch the approach of there, and we called the Germans goons, and we would call ourselves Kriegies, Kriegsgefangenen. So as they approached, the chaps standing at the door would shout out, "Goon up! Goon up!" And now the idea was every hut had it, because there's no good just a hut where activity is going on, because they would go straight to that hut. So every hut had to have a goon watch, and they were called goons because in American papers there was a character where and it was two hands on a wall like this, and a round face at the top, and that was the goon. So they hated it. So we made a point of always shouting out, "Hello, goon!" So sometimes we used to get cigarettes from the Germans, and they came from one of the Balkan states. And I've got a feeling they were called Eleganti, but I'm not too sure. But it wasn't a real cigarette, because half of it was a cardboard tube and half of it was some form of made-up tobacco. And I used to, as I didn't smoke, I used to love to go out and go up to one of these things and go and blow this in his face, and then make a run for it. A friend I got friendly with in the hut that in the room I was in, was of all name, his name was Bill Smith. So Bill Smith, he was a corporal in the RAF regiment, and he'd been a cook, and unfortunately he suffered, of all things, being a cook, with stomach ulcers, and so the result was that I got all his chocolate and he got all my cigarettes, and it was so bad that the Red Cross, when they came on a check, said that he's got to have treatment or he's got to go back to UK, and they decided that he will be repatriated. Well, unfortunately, it was getting towards the end of the war, and it's very difficult to do anything. Things were getting bad. The guards were getting older, old men in uniform. Their uniforms were getting terrible. You can't believe it. They had a long. The Germans always wore long coats, and the coats had no hem on them, just bare end to the material. Yes, it's that bad. And to say they were all old men, and it was the same with lots of tradesmen used to come in, because the water and electrics and all the rest of it was a problem, and people were detailed off to track these people, and while they bent over dealing with something or other, pinch their tools. So we got a lot of tools that way. Now, I mentioned tools because unfortunately I got involved in one incident, because just outside of the camp was was called the cooler, and this was a long brick building of cells, where if you got caught doing something wrong, or you got crossed with the Germans, they put you in solitary confinement. And unfortunately, one day I've been given a pair of ice skate blades, and they managed to drill a hole through these two blades and turn them into a cutter. And I was given this to hide. And unfortunately, I was in my room on my own, and I was using the thing. Also, a hand came over and got it. I didn't realise a German had crept along the ruddy corridor. He saw me through the window, come to the corridor, and he got it. And I was due to go into the cooler, and by stroke of luck, the appel was called, and so we all had to go away out to the out. So that was, I got away with it, but the cooler was always filled up with blokes. I don't know why, but the Americans in particular caused a lot of trouble, and they were in there. And very fortunately, the cooler was very close to the outside wire. And so every day, chaps used to go along and shout to them in there to keep them happy, just to keep them going. So that was that. Right, so that's about it. Now we're getting out towards the end of the time in Germany, and things are not going too well. The guards that they were coming in for rest and recuperation, and from the Eastern Front, and they were given time to be guards at the camp, and so it's getting pretty grim, and eventually we could hear. Oh, I should mention that every time during the day we had American aircraft on daylight raids come across. And of course, as soon as they appeared, we could see them up there, we all cheered. And the result was, every time they came across, a warning was sounded, and we all had to go back into our huts because I couldn't stand this cheering all the time. Unfortunately, one American chap, he was in the doorway and he didn't realise that it was a call, and they shot him in the doorway. Yeah, and unfortunately, he was a son of a American Senate, and that didn't go down very well. You know, but there we are. That was the only fatality we had all the time there. I should mention, of course, that Stalingrad 3, they shot 50 prisoners there. And because they tried to, well, they did, they escaped through a tunnel. That's the famous Tom, Dick and Harry. You probably know the film. Yeah, and they shot 50 of them. Yeah. So not good. And anyway, eventually we could hear rumbling of gunfire going on. And this is now getting around to beginning of May of 1945. And you could hear this rumbling going on, and it got louder every day. Got bad, and we knew that the Russians weren't far away. And Zemke came into his own then, because Hitler said, all camps, everybody has got to go and move east. Just how you are, nothing, no food, nothing. You just get up and go, and of course it was just ridiculous, because you just marching there with nothing at all, no food, no facilities, and of course a lot died. Very fortunately, Zemke, we were told to get ready to march, and we're going to march 150 miles to Hamburg. And Zemke managed to persuade the commandant, don't do it. Even though Hitler had said you've got to march, he said, look, just don't go, just disappear, just go. So overnight, all the guards, we got up in the morning, all the gates were open, and all the guards had gone, and the commandant had gone. And that was it. And within hours, a Russian tank appears at the gate. And I went to the gate, I ran over and saw this tank. And I saw this chap pop up out of the tank. And of course, I was only a young 22, 23-year-old bloke, and I had no knowledge of these things. But he's glaring. And he was either drunk or he's drugged. And that's our first contact with the Russians. And Zemke, he could speak Russian and all the rest of it, got on well with these Russians and managed to get food and all the rest of it, and medication. And that was it, because I had trouble with my legs. And then the Russians arrived, and they said, "You've got to march, and you're going to march to Lübeck, I think it was. We were going to go to Hamburg, and they said, you're going to get ready to go because you're all going to be moved over." Anyway, Zemke, with a lot of effort, got them to forget it, and they gave us food. They even put on a show, Russian dancing, whatever. So and I couldn't resist it. I was told don't go down to Bart because things are not good down there, but I couldn't resist it, so I went down there, and I was shocked when I saw these after these tanks had gone through, all these rough-looking Russians were there, mopping up. Absolutely terrible things going on there. And I saw a poor old couple, and this Russian peasant-looking type, he made this couple pull a safe out of the house, and it was in the doorstep there, and they were protesting, and up came a Russian officer with a pistol and got him to back off, yeah. And I think it's not good. So what I saw going on there, so I made it back to camp, and then of course there we are, no food, nothing, and very, very fortunately somebody managed to get hold of a lot of tubes, like a giant toothpaste tubes, and it was and the labels were all burnt, so they would have been in a bonfire or something. And anyway, it was cheese, soft cheese, and I ate a lot of this, and I've been starving, and I was nearly sick with it, so it was pretty terrible. So anyway, we thought, what's going to happen to us now? We've got no water, nothing had all been turned off. And they decided that Group Captain, I forgot his name now, and one other officer, they made it to the American lines, fortunately. They got there and reported, they were in trouble. They got in touch with Washington, and immediately in Washington they set up a exercise called Lucky Strike, like full names, and for 3 days, very fortunately, this flak school came into its own because it had a runway, and over 3 days. I think it was 30 or 40 flying fortresses, Junker 52s, or 25. They came in, and they just came in, engine running, door open, 30 people would get in, and away they went. It kept going. And they started on the Saturday, and I didn't get on any of these. I went back on the Sunday morning, and I got onto this flight out on the Sunday morning, and away we went. Because you see, the Americans, they went to somewhere just outside of Paris, and then they were shipped back to the States. And I landed, of all places, would you believe it? I landed 6 miles from home in this flying fortress. Of course, I didn't get home. And it was a Ford Airdrome, which is just outside of Bognor Regis, which is my home. And I say, stay here. They disinfected us and all the rest of it and gave us food. And I don't know, I was just sort of a bit disorientated, and I didn't do what they said. I just wandered away. And I wandered off down the road, and it started to rain. And I ran for a barn, and I opened this door of the barn, and there was a chap sitting in an invalid chair, and he went, "Oh!" and I said, "Oh no, it's all right." And I was persuaded him everything was okay, and I told him, I said, "Oh, I only lived down the road there," and I can't believe it to this day. He had a pen and paper, and a piece of paper, and he said, "Write a note to your parents, and I'll go into Bognor and give it to your parents." And I wrote this little note and gave it to him, and he did in fact do that. He took that note, and we still got. In fact, I've still got the note here. Yeah, because a few years ago, my brother said, "Do you remember that note you wrote to Mum?" I got it, and he gave it to me. And anyway, we get on the train. We're going to be taken up to Cardington, up in the Midlands, where the big airships were stationed to be dealt with. And we pull into the nearest station, which is just outside of Bognor, 7 miles outside of Bognor, which is Barnham Junction. Barnham Junction. It's on the Brighton to Portsmouth line, and we pull in there to the railway station. And I'm sitting there. The train stopped there. I don't know why. And I'm looking out the window, and there is a chap on the bike. I said, "Oh, hello, Ernie." I said, "Oh, Ernie." He looked at me and said, "Christ, who are you there?" I said, "I'm Ron Conson. We're at school together." "Oh, Christ, what's happened to you?" I said, "Oh, no." Anyway, he said, "I'll go and tell your mum I've seen you." So he went and told my mother and father, that I was okay and whatever. Anyway, I go up north to Carlington and sent home on a 6-month convalescent. Yeah. Unfortunately, I had this trouble with my legs, ulcers down his leg, and I couldn't stand. I had to stand like a stalk on one leg, And in fact, I still got the scars to prove it. Yeah, so there we are. So really, that's come into the end of my story, and I very fortunately, everything worked out for the best. I went back into the Air Force, and I got priority demob after 6 months, and the only thing that came out of it, I was put onto. Of course, the radar was of no use then. War was over. The only thing that was any good was navigational radar. So I was put on a station that handled navigation radar. I forget the name of what it was, but that's how it was. And I was interviewed by the officer commanding, and he said, "You've had a rough old deal." He said, "You've had no promotion." And he said, he promoted me straight away to, I was a leading LAC, a leading aircraftsman. And he said, "We'll promote you," he said, "but it's no good us promoting you, and then you just being demobbed. What's the point? You'll have to stay in." He said, "It's on there for a couple of years, and we'll do it." Yeah. And of course, my state of mind was such that I didn't want anything more to do with the war or the forces or anything, which in many ways was a pity, really. But my life went on very well after that. I had some very exciting things. I was on the Berlin airlift. I was involved in trials of refuelling in flight, which was quite new, and nobody was doing refuelling in flight, and I was on that. And so I had quite an interesting life after the war. So there we are. I only hope everything's all right and you enjoyed it, and I'm pleased to have told you all about it. There's a lot more, but I didn't want to bother you with all that.
Well, I do have some questions. So I guess first thing first, could you tell us about seeing your family for the first time? What that was actually like? Yes, of course that was a wonderful feeling. They all got round me because I was the eldest of 6 children. They all gathered around me, and I was a bit thin, and with my mother's cooking, and I was given a double, because food was being rationed, so I was given a double food ration, it was very good, and I had to have a bit of surgery on the leg, on the one leg. The other one I managed to cure all right. And the great thing about it was I met all my mates. Like myself, have been in there. Unfortunately, some didn't make it. There's one who was shot down, and another one that was Bill Snow. He was on the HMS Swan. He got drowned. So one or two didn't make it, and one of my mates who was in the Navy, he pushed me around in a wheelchair for a few days.
and we went from one pub to the other because beer was in very short supply. So the word got around, oh, there's beer in such a pub. So he pushed me around to a pub with a beer. Yeah. And there was two of my schoolmates that they were on coaling ships that ran down from Newcastle down to London, and that's all they did during the war, because a lot of them, went down the mines during the war, and these chaps were on this coaling ships, and they both got TB. And little did I realise in those days, there I was drinking with these two chaps with TB, who virtually, I'm afraid, both died, and I was there with them. Yeah.
And so, just to jump back a little bit, because I didn't want to, when you were in the flow of your story, I didn't want to interrupt you.
Yeah.
But there are definitely some things I want to get a little more detail about. You mentioned going to North Africa.
Yeah.
First.
Yes.
When you were in North Africa, did you experience any attacks by the German Luftwaffe?
No. By the time I got there, they died off. It was just ground. But at Leros, we were Stuka bombed there. That was awful. That's one of the worst things. Being the Stukas, and they come down and they got a whistling noise with them, and then just release a bomb. That was pretty awful. And on the site that we were on, the Germans made 190 air raids on Leros. So every time one went out, that the rear gunner used to give us a burst of shoot at us. So we had to dive behind these stone walls. Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit more? Because your first actual action was on Leros.
It was, yeah. I wasn't right up the front end in North Africa, no. I was back, because I never expected that a chap on radar, a mechanic, is going to get caught. In fact, as far as I know, and people have done a lot of research, I think I'm the only bloody fool that got caught as a radar mechanic.
Well, the situation was, though, on Leros, after some of the fighting, it was surrendered.
Yeah.
You mentioned the German parachutists, the paratroopers that came down, and they were taken care of. From where you were on the island, did you see them actually coming down?
Oh God, yes.
So describe...
In fact, I saw one morning one of these Junker 53s. Had 3 engines, by the way, one on the nose and 2 and a rib side. I think it was a Junker 52. I know. Anyway, and I saw one come in, and one chap got caught on the tail of the aircraft as it was coming in, and that went down, and it dived in, and it went straight into the harbour, and they've since then I believe they've recovered that aircraft. I went back in year 2000, and I was told by a restaurateur there that they were recovering this plane. Yeah.
When you say it got caught, some anti-aircraft...
His parachute got caught on the tail.
Oh, I thought you meant the plane got...
And then the plane went down into the into the port.
What caused the plane to go down? What caused the plane to go down?
Well, I don't know. I don't think it was that chap. I think it was just shot down. I don't know. Yeah. I'm sure people do know what happened to it, yeah.
Well, from your position on the island, could you see the anti-aircraft fire opening up on these planes?
Oh yeah.
So
yes.
Can you tell us about that?
Oh God, yeah. Well, they were shot at, but none of them were brought down except this one, and that was by pure chance, I think. Yeah, none of them got come down. Yeah. And yeah, what was I going to say about that? Yeah, what upset me the most, and it's always on my mind all the time, was seeing all those poor people, all those chaps, both British and German, lying in the gutter, you know, all just lying in the gutter. That was terrible. Yeah, all dead bodies. Yeah, yeah. And a lot of the poor parachutists that came down on the first day, they were still lying out in the sun for a week. You know, it was, yeah, not very nice. Not very nice. In fact, there was one I should never forget. He was this parachute was in a kneeling position, and he was just dead. He's like a statue. Yeah, awful. As I say, you couldn't land a plane on Leros during the war. That's why they had. Seaplanes, which there was a slope went into the water, and they had a crane. Went out and picked up these seaplanes and brought them up at this slope there. Leros has been notorious for, that they put all the infirm and mental cases on Leros. They had a great big hospital building there, and anybody mental in Greece was shipped to Leros, and it became a scandal. And when I went there in 2000, they had gone, and just all the building was standing there derelict, and all the old iron bedsteads were just rusting away outside.
Thank you for sharing that. Could you tell us a little bit more about where exactly on the island your station was? Like, describe.
Just outside Aleki, one of the two major towns. I think they call it the capital, actually. Yeah.
But what, like, geographically, what was the terrain? Like, did you have a high?
No. What happened when we first went there? Myself and this sergeant, we were the technical people, so we thought, we'll sight the radar up on that mountain by the what have you. We went up there. It was a disaster. I should have known that. So we realised that it didn't need to be up high. It'd be down low with a flat in front of it, and that's what we did. And we selected a spot which unfortunately wasn't very good from a defence point of view, but it was ideal for radar, and it overlooked the seaplane base across the bay. So we saw all the activity, the submarines coming in and the seaplanes.
Before the Germans came, are there some notable things you remember?
Yeah, right. Getting there with equipment was difficult, and we had to hire mules from the locals who took us there over some pretty rough ground. And unfortunately, one of these poor mules, he had a reel of telephone cable on his back, and it was ridiculous, really. He was top heavy, and he tilted off and fell into a gully on the side, and we had to haul this poor mule out of the gully with us there. And so that was that. And then also I found that after a while the thing was running 24 hours a day, and we're using a lot of petrol, and we found that we couldn't get enough petrol because all the other people had a call on it, and all we could get was aviation petrol. And this is all very well, and all of a sudden, poor old generator started playing erratic, and I decided, it was this fuel. So I stripped the engine down, and the valves were all pitted, and I managed to get hold of a kit, and I had to grind the valves in again. so that was a bit of a problem. Yeah. And the Greeks were very, very good, and we always used to leave a little bit of food in the every day. We had stew every day, and we always used to leave a bit of stew in the thing, and they used to take it away and come back with a very nice clean pot, every day, and that was a bit of a laugh. And also they built little stone houses for us. Because we originally we had a bivvy for 2 people, just a bivvy, and they just put the bivvy on the top, on the roof, and had the walls round stone. So it was quite comfortable. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you giving a little more context to people. It's just your mind, the way your details are incredible. Can you take a minute and describe the conditions on the prisoner ship?
Yeah, well, yes. We were just shoved down into the hold, and they shoved a lot of tins of hardtack biscuit in. We weren't in there that long. I don't think more than a day, because it's not all that far, from the Dodecanese to Athens. But the tins came in handy, of course, and that was it. Yeah, we were in the dark and it was horrible. Yeah, you just could hear the engines grinding away hour after hour. Yeah.
Could you tell us that first day, Mr. Collins, when you saw over the horizon these German aircraft?
I know.
Can you just describe that feeling? What was that for you?
Well, not really. I mean, rather interesting. I was, 22, I suppose, and I didn't sort of take it. It didn't seem to be a worry, any of it, until the firing started. The very first thing that happened was the first aircraft came over and threw an anti-personnel audio thing, and a terrible sound. That's the first thing that happened before they started dropping bombs. There's a terrible piercing noise. So it was a personal thing. What I call it. It was to frighten you.
To disorient you.
Exactly. Yeah. That's the first thing that happened. That's the first time. Up to that time, it was just been like a film. It didn't seem to be much bother really. I mean, I didn't expect it. I didn't expect that. I got involved to any great extent. After all, I was a radar mechanic. I expect to be at the back, behind the lines. But I mean, it was ironic to think that I started off saying I don't want to handle a 303 rifle, and I'm handed one at the end. It's really madness. Yeah. I fired one shot, and I was told by the captain, you shouldn't have done that. You don't fire until I tell you. He said you give her a game away.
What do you remember firing at? What did you say?
Oh, nothing. I thought, well, I haven't handled a 303 for years. I'll have a go. I'm expected to do it, so let's give it a try. Yeah. I did not handle the hand grenades. I didn't, and there was even had a sticky bomb there. Have you heard of a sticky bomb? No.
Can you tell what was it?
It's a bomb, a big round bomb, and 2 handles, and the 2 handles are together, and you open it up like this, and there's this sticky bomb there, and you're supposed to go out and stick it on the side of a tank. What it was doing there, I don't know, but that's what it was there. We should have stayed together, and and fought it out. I mean, we came across quite a lot of other people. For instance, we came across an army captain that was shot in his leg, and he was wounded, and he was in a bad way. Yeah, and quite a lot of different people. Yeah.
So, Didn't you guys have an officer that was supposed to keep you guys together?
There was, but we only ever saw him once. He came once and you know, saw that we were all working away, and the sergeant was in charge, and it was all okay, and that's it. And he, rather strange, he said to us, he said, if things go wrong, he said, submarines will come in and pick you up. And he said, and I thought to myself, that's a bit bad. We only just arrived, and he's talking about, you know, yeah. And he did actually say that, yeah. He said submarines will come at night and pick you up.
70 million people were killed in World War II.
Yeah.
What would you want to see future generations do to make you feel like the sacrifices made by your generation were worth it? Is there anything in particular you want to see change? Or?
Well, I don't think we can change it very much. I'm afraid it's all part of the way we're living. You know, I mean, the greatest thing, of course, is housing, isn't it? You know, if only everybody had a house. I've always said that the key to it all is housing, because if everybody got I can give you an absolute guaranteed situation where this is so. And if you've got a house, it means that you want a refrigerator, you want curtains, you want carpet. So you create an economy, don't you? And you create pride. You know, go to house. Now, my wife came from a mining village up in Yorkshire, and these when Maggie Thatcher came in, that she brought in the right to buy. Overnight, all those houses, instead of being all run down, started to be painted and the gardens done. It just showed you, once they were bought the bloody thing that was theirs, they did something with it. They couldn't care less beforehand. Yeah. And if only, and of course, if people haven't got good decent housing and they're all cramped and got their attitude is terrible, isn't it? Mm. And that would help. It's probably the same in the States.
You are a vessel of wisdom.
I'm only talking the obvious, aren't I? Really? I'm only talking the obvious, really.